Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Play 2 podcast where relatives of famous athletes, entertainers, and musicians get to tell their stories. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week, former Los Angeles Dodgers prospect and Stanford alumnus Austin Yount joins the show. Austin, who played both in the infield as well as at pitcher, was the 2004 4A High School Player of the Year in Arizona as a junior and set a school record with 10 RBI in a single game as a senior. Austin went on to Stanford, where he led the team in ERA as a freshman, and as a junior, he appeared in 2 games in the 2008 College World Series. Austin's uncle, Robin Yount, was a 2-time American League MVP and is enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame. In 2010, Robin's son, Dustin, was Austin's teammate in the Dodgers minor league system. Austin, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. It's great to be here.
The first question I have is, how did your love of baseball come to be?
Well, I guess you could say it was a bit of a family affair. We grew up around the field. Obviously, my uncle played. I was there when he hit his 3,000 hit and when he retired, and we kind of bounced around. And then my dad was the president of the AAA team for a bit in Phoenix, so was at the park every day with them. And it was kind of something we grew up around, and it just seemed natural, to be honest. It was something we did in the backyard and messed around with my brother and cousin, and it was kind of part of our lives.
From your perspective, what was it like to see your uncle hit number 3,000?
I remember flying around. I think we were in Milwaukee, and then we had to go to Baltimore, and I remember being in DC and doing some of the tour stuff. But I was pretty young, but certainly could appreciate the excitement of the crowd and his teammates. But I don't know that I fully understood the gravity of what he did at the time, but it was kind of just watching my uncle play. But now with a little bit more perspective, it was a great opportunity and pretty cool to reflect and that I got to be there.
Growing up, you played 2 different positions for the most part, on the infield, a lot at third base, and on the mound at pitcher. How were you able to balance both of those very different positions?
I had always pitched and played infield, so it kind of was just part of playing. I don't know that I had any strategy, just happened to have a decent arm and then was able to play multiple positions. And I remember my dad always been like, wait till somebody tells you can't anymore. It wasn't something I absolutely felt like I had to do. It was just I got the opportunity to do it. And even when I went to college, that was part of how I looked at college choices. Was I wanted to be able to play multiple positions if I was good enough. And for me, it was always super helpful just to be able to almost balance the 2 mental loads. So much failure in hitting. And then if I had a bad day hitting, I could go out and pitch and feel like I redeemed myself and vice versa. So to me, it was almost helpful to manage the mental part of the game, to be honest.
With your dad being a major league pitcher, if you ever had an issue or you were struggling with something, how was he able to help you work through that?
Talking about it is helpful. Failure is such a big part of the game, and being able to bounce back the next day, that was something that was always constantly discussed. My dad and my uncle, their mentality was always about trying to help the team win, and that was always stressed. And if you're focusing on winning, a lot of the other stuff, you kind of forget about the individual failures. I think that being stressed all the time and just trying to find a way to win makes you forget about the other stuff. And that was ingrained in all of us really early on. And someone that's done it before and survived to talk about it is a good reminder that this is just a game. So I think for me, it was always more on the mental side and just continuing to move forward.
With the team aspect being so important, when you were the junior and senior, you put up some pretty amazing individual numbers. How are you able to keep perspective and trying to keep it team first as opposed to not taking those individual numbers and saying, look what I'm doing?
I'll tell you, it was pretty easy. For me, the main thing I wanted to do, which at the time our high school had never done, was win 3 championships in a row. My cousin Dustin, I always give him crap about this, but their team, I think, went back to back and then lost his senior year. And then I was fortunate enough to win sophomore year, junior year. And then I really wanted to outdo his team and win 3 in a row. So that was kind of the focus. And our team was so dang good. We had quite a few guys with just as good or not better individual stats. Looking back, they're good statistics, but winning is a heck of a lot more fun. And when we had the talent we did, it kind of kept everybody in check.
From those title runs, is there a moment that really sticks out in your mind that kind of was that team building moment that said, we can do this?
I give a lot of credit to our high school coach, Coach Dustin, who was juggling a lot of egos and a lot of pretty talented kids and trying to get them all to gel. And I give Coach Dustin a lot of credit for wrangling us and keeping us focused. He's a Hall of Fame coach in his own right. I think a big part of his influence helped us. There was a lot of guys on our team that came from baseball families, all had similar mentalities about winning, and we had all played together since we were like 12 years old. So we knew each other really well. A lot of us went out and played in college and then against each other, and it was a lot of fun. As far as individual moments, I can remember senior year, I think we were nationally ranked. A lot of people started rooting against us because we had such a good team, and we lost to a team we shouldn't have late, right before the state championship run. And I think everybody was curious how we would react. And I think we went out and run ruled every team in the state tournament after that. I don't think that happens if we don't lose late in the season. That's just a reflection of that team we had. We had a lot of character, and we really wanted to win the 3rd in a row. I think everybody was pretty focused on it. It was a lot of great memories from that team.
But when you win the 3rd in a row, did you call your cousin Dustin and drive it home a little bit?
Oh, I'm still driving it home. Between my brother and my cousin and I, we all went to the same high school. We still have text threads where we're debating who had the best team. So we try to live our glory days a little bit, which is fun.
So we'll get back to your cousin Dustin a little bit later because I know you played with him. But when was the first moment you started to realize, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm really good at this and perhaps I could go somewhere and play in the next level in college?
Good question. I was really fortunate my freshman year of high school that I got a chance to play on the varsity team, and then somebody got hurt and I got a chance to play. I held my own as a freshman and I wasn't really thinking about colleges at that point. It certainly was a mentality. I think my brother and my cousin would say the same thing, that it was almost an assumption from our standpoint that we play baseball and try to make a career out of it. Probably from a naive perspective early, it didn't really think twice about it. And then I would say after my junior year of high school, I had a pretty decent season. I realized that I was going to have a real chance to play not just at the next level, but at potentially an elite level at college, which was exciting. I hadn't really gone there. We had done a bunch of college visits my sophomore year, but it wasn't really real. After junior year, that summer was kind of a whirlwind of tournaments, Team USA, and doing the whole college recruiting thing. So I was fortunate enough to have a pretty good season that kind of launched into that process. But I think it was just assumed that it would kind of happen, but it wasn't top of mind necessarily.
As a junior, you hit nearly 500 with 46 RBI and had a ridiculous .50 ERA, which, I mean, that is absolutely absurd. How were you able to be so dominant on both pitching and in the batter's box?
I hadn't pitched for 2 years before that, and I had always been a decent pitcher, but we didn't really need another pitcher on our high school team. So I had always just played infield freshman, sophomore year, and then junior year, kind of time to start being a part of that rotation. So that was why all of a sudden I got a chance to be on the mound. And I don't know if anybody really was sure what was going to happen, including myself. But I was by no means a hard throwing that was just dominating people. But I knew how to pitch and I was very accurate. And I think part of that was being an infielder was kind of translated to the mound in that way. And in high school, that was within itself relatively dominant just because I could throw any pitch I wanted in any count and made me a good pitcher both in high school and college.
When you see somebody like Shohei Ohtani doing what he's doing, do you watch that going, I understand how he's able to do that, having gone through it yourself?
Two parts of that. I'd say one from a mental and physical load, for sure. I've always thought it felt arbitrary that players only played one position. I physically never felt like it was too much during a season to play. As long as I had a routine, to me, it really wasn't anything different. It was more a matter of could you be good enough at both of those at the next level? And that's debatable, be able to focus on two things at that most elite level. So from that standpoint, I'm really excited to see. It's like a 4-minute mile, right? It's like everyone said it couldn't be done until it got done, and then a bunch of players did it. I feel like that's potentially about to happen. I think you're going to see more two-way guys. Him in particular is just unbelievable. The talent that he has and being as elite as he is at that elite level is crazy. It's fun to watch. I mean, it is a blast to watch. And I think it shows that fans are into it and are excited to see him get a chance to play every day.
Yeah, I went to a Rangers game earlier this year, and it was Eovaldi versus Ohtani because I wanted to see that because it hadn't been done in so long. For you, if you get a chance to see Ohtani, is that appointment viewing for you just because of the unique factor and the fact that you could particularly can relate to it?
I don't know if I really would even think about it that way. I think I appreciate that it's just good baseball. As a fan, I recognize how hard it is to just play at that elite level in general and to be so dominant in each position, whether he's pitching or hitting. I think even if he did one of those exclusively, I think it would be fun to watch. He's a top talent in both ways. So, yeah, I think maybe I can appreciate good hitting and good pitching, and I like to watch both. I don't know if necessarily I have any unique viewpoint as much as just enjoying the capacity and the talent that he has at either one of those positions.
Ohtani is the idol for many kids growing up right now. When you were growing up, who are some of the players that you watched that you were like, you know what? I really want to be like that guy.
Derek Jeter was my guy. I mean, that's who I modeled everything I did after him. I just loved watching him play and really just the way he went about the game and trying to win and get his team to win. That was understated. It kind of jived with my personality and the way I went about playing. And obviously, it was kind of my core era of watching players. So he was for sure probably number one. From a pitching standpoint, Greg Maddox, I could watch that guy pitch all day long, and probably just because I was not dominant. I was not a flame throwing ready. So it was fun to see somebody that could have really good accuracy and be successful on the mound. So he was always the guy I watched from a pitching standpoint.
With the family's baseball connections, did you ever get a chance to meet Jeter or Maddox?
I have not. My brother and I had talked about at one point trying to go see Jeter's last game, which in hindsight would have been incredible. I think I remember that season he got hurt early. So we almost bought tickets at the very beginning of the season, and then Jeter got hurt. And we were like, maybe not. So we probably should have pulled that one. And then I've never actually gotten to go to the Hall of Fame, Cooperstown. The rest of my family has. We were making a run at the Little League World Series when my uncle got inducted. So I had to miss it. So that's still on my bucket list. Maybe I could figure out a way to meet those guys at some point, but we'll see.
Going back to after your junior year here, the recruiting process kind of heats up. How many schools are coming after you, considering you're coming off of a Player of the Year season? And what helped you narrow down the decision to eventually go to Stanford?
I was really fortunate that I was pretty highly recruited. We were out in Joplin for Team USA trials. So you can imagine all those players, everybody was being recruited at that point from that cohort. I think kind of from day one, and you look at my uncle's path and my dad's both signed out of high school and my dad got hurt. A big part of our growing up was one, things can happen. Two, even if you play 20 years in the big leagues, you got to find something else to do with your life, and education's pretty dang important. And I think it's easy to assume that we were all kind of pushed to play baseball. And I couldn't tell you more that it couldn't be further from the truth. baseball, I think, was the last sport I actually played as a kid. And both my parents have always pushed doing other things and finding other interests. And I'm very thankful to my parents for stressing that. So I had pretty good grades. The whole goal was to not let grades be a filtering process to where we went to college, and have it more be about where could we play. And so at that point, I had pretty decent grades, good enough to get a top education, and a relatively big nerd. And I think back in my mind, wanted to be an astronaut or a pilot. So I was definitely wanting to go to a top tier educational school. And it was just a matter of whether I was going to be good enough from a baseball perspective to play somewhere. So then it got narrowed down really between, I think I took visits to Stanford, Vanderbilt, and University of Texas. I mean, I couldn't go wrong. I think Corbin had just taken over Vanderbilt's program a year or two before, and I was a really big fan of that coaching staff. One of my sisters went to Vanderbilt, and so I had gotten the opportunity to get to know that coaching staff pretty early on and had a really good relationship and just loved their mentality. And then same with the University of Texas. One of my teammates from Chaparral went on my visit with me, Ike Davis. He really wanted to go. So that was kind of started to bubble up, and they had a really good honors program. And then Stanford. At the end of the day, Stanford was the one, if I really got an opportunity to play there, it was going to be a chance to play for the College World Series and get a top tier education. All three of those are an amazing education and obviously established baseball programs, but Stanford bubbled up from an academic standpoint. You just couldn't beat that program.
Stanford's about as good as it gets.
After I took my visit, I remember meeting the team, and it really clicked, got along really well with the team, and I could tell that was going to be the perfect fit. And now as an alumni, I owe a lot to the university, and I'm very appreciative and try to get involved and give back where I can, because it changed the course of my life for sure.
We'll get back to Stanford in 1 second, but I do want to ask 10 RBI in a single game in high school. That has to stand out as a memory, I would think.
Yeah, I think we won by like 29 runs or something like that. So I think it's just one of those freak things. I think I hit 2 grand slams in 1 inning or something like that. So it's a crazy stat, but also it just was a matter of getting the opportunity, which is just luck, to be honest. But yeah, you look at it, you're like, what kind of talent were those guys playing? But I think we only ended up beating that team by 1 or 2 runs the next time we played, which was kind of terrifying. But I don't know if I've ever hit 2 home runs in one game since that, but do it in 1 inning and have the bases loaded in both situations is kind of wild.
You finish your senior year, you win the 3rd title, you're getting ready to head to Stanford. Were there any nerves because you had played with the same people for 4, 5, 6 years in some cases? Was there any nerves about having to go somewhere new?
After junior year, you do all these showcases and kind of used to playing with different teams at that point. So that part was just part of the process. I think after high school, I went to the Northwoods League. We had talked to the Stanford coach and kind of said, hey, was there a way we can get into one of these college summer leagues to just start playing at a higher level ahead of college? I think somebody got hurt or something happened with an opening in the Northwoods League. And that year was the first year they allowed anybody from high school. And I think it was like me, a guy named Andy Suter, who he's one of my best friends, became my roommate that summer and then became my roommate again with the Dodgers. And then a guy named Brandon Crawford, who was pretty decent. So the 3 of us were the first high school guys in that league. And it's basically like minor league baseball. I think we played something like 50, 60 games over the course of the summer. That was like thrown into the mix, playing with guys much older than me. And I was pretty much accustomed to the level of play once I got to Stanford, or at least had some level of expectation of what was coming because of that.
How hard was the initial adjustment in the Northwoods League for you?
That summer was pretty difficult, to be honest. I didn't really get a chance to play much. I tell guys all the time, go find a place to play. It doesn't do any good to be at a level and then not play at all. So it was an adjustment from that perspective. I'd been at a pretty elite level, and then I don't know if they really believed high school guys could compete. And I never really got much playing time, which was a challenge within itself. So I think there was some good that came out of it in the end. But the baseball part and managing whether you got consistent playing time or not, that was a bit of an adjustment for sure.
When you get to Stanford, what was it like to balance baseball practice and then the games with also the rigorous academic schedule?
Stanford does a really good job providing as many resources as you want and they expect excellence out of their student athletes. I think you have all these examples when you get there of student athletes that are excelling at both, and it's kind of an expectation, and you kind of jump in, you get busy, and you kind of figure it out. I look back now and it's exhausting, but it's also kind of part of the fun and you really gel with your teammates because you're all going through it together. And for me, it was always, I liked having a whole different facet of my life that was not baseball. So having the academics and the professors were always super involved and very approachable. You could get really as much out of it as you wanted to put into it. And I think I got a chance to appreciate that much more when I was going back to finish school and had a little bit more time to spend with the professors and take advantage of all the academics available at Stanford. I was fortunate enough to kind of get both sides of that. It was fun.
What was your welcome to the Pac-12 moment?
I guess early on in fall, I remember sitting and listening to Coach Marquis. For anybody that remembers Stanford in the early 2000s, they were an absolute powerhouse. And I think they went to the College World Series like 5 times in a row. So during my high school years, Stanford was in the College World Series and in the championship, the majority of that. So they were kind of on this pedestal. And I kind of remember having a moment seeing the Stanford hat. How am I here? How did I get here? We always used to open up the season against Cal State Fullerton, which was kind of the other team that was in the College World Series. I was fortunate enough to start at third base as a freshman at the beginning of the season. And that was a pretty surreal moment to kind of be on the field with the teams I had been watching on TV. And there was definitely a moment that tried to get rid of it and get into the game, but kind of a surreal moment that I was there and getting a chance to play at that level.
Cal State Fullerton, didn't you win the game in the Super Regional that sent Stanford to the College World Series?
My junior year, we hosted our regional, and then I don't know how it worked out that we had to go play Cal State Fullerton in the Supers at Fullerton. That was an intimidating path to have to get to the World Series, but we went down there and won the first game and then won the second. And yeah, I think I pitched 5 innings or 6 innings in there and got the win, which was a lot of fun. You work so hard all season to get there that it was a pretty special memory.
What was it like to get to Omaha as a player and see Rosenblatt Stadium?
All the feelings you can imagine. My sophomore year at Stanford, we had a really, really talented team, and we knew we had a talented team, and we ended up with a 500 record that I think all of us were pretty disappointed about that season. So we kind of came into that next year in '08 with a chip on our shoulder. And you set these goals as a team at the beginning of the season and you go one series at a time, one game at a time. And then to actually get there, it was such a, I don't know if relief is the right word, but I think it was just this amazing feeling. And I think we all sensed it that we went out and did what no one else thought we could do. And then I think we were the last year of Rosenblatt. So that was special. And especially now to be able to say we were the last year was super cool. I mean, they do such an amazing job in Omaha and make it feel so special. It's just memories you really can't take away. Every year it is one of the tournaments of baseball that I try not to miss because it is fun to watch and I know how excited the players are. And it's kind of one of the last few times till you get to the big leagues that you get to really play as a team to try to win the World Series.
You pitched in a couple games in that College World Series. Is there anything from you being on the mound that kind of sticks out?
I had started most of the season as our Friday guy because Jeremy Bleish, our first rounder, got hurt. And then Jeremy came back. I came in relief a few times, I think both times against Georgia. So one was a mediocre appearance and the next time was a much better appearance. That's what I remember between the two, but we lost both times against Georgia. So it was bittersweet, I guess, but it was surreal. I think the second outing, I got to go back and forth between third base and the mound, which was a cool moment, but it was special to get a chance to play. Obviously, wish we would have gone a little further, but it was fun.
Whether as a position player or at pitcher, is there anyone that you started over that became an all-star that fans might know?
I do think I have an old scorecard where I started over Buster Posey in Team USA. So that one I hold on to because somebody made a big mistake starting me over him. But he came in and pinch hit for me. So they eventually got to the right conclusion. And he was a two-way guy for us on that team. So he was a really good pitcher. And arguably at the time, I would say was as talented, if not more, at that point as a pitcher. So he was just an incredible athlete.
Have you ever met up with Posey and have him autograph that scorecard?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen him since probably the College World Series. He was Florida State, and we played against the first game. I don't think I've seen him since then, at least where I've had a chance to talk to him. But yeah, maybe one day.
One more question on him because I'm curious. Do you think his success as a pitcher and understanding how a pitcher thinks and throws helped him to become a great catcher?
I'm sure it was helpful. It certainly didn't hurt him from a play calling standpoint and all that, and pitch calling standpoint. I'm sure. Even empathizing on the mental side for the pitchers, I'm sure it was all helpful for him.
You leave Stanford and you get drafted by one of the most storied franchises in Major League Baseball history, in the Los Angeles Dodgers. Where were you when you found out you were drafted?
I was at the hotel before the Cal State Fullerton Super Regional, and I think I was asleep when I got drafted. I had a bunch of missed calls. Kind of a funny story, but I think it was the morning of our second game. I had been sleeping in and just had missed the call.
I love that you're sleeping when you got drafted.
I had no idea when and where I would go, so I tried not to even think about it and just tried to get ready for the game.
What was it like going to a spring training and kind of getting acclimated to the LA Dodgers system?
They had a thing called Instructional League where they bring the top 15 rounds. They would bring them to the spring training facility after the season just to get acclimated. So that in a smaller setting. And so I went to Instructional League after my first short season. And that was a chance to get to know everybody. They had just moved spring training from Florida to Arizona. So it was a brand new facility. The Dodgers are such a phenomenal organization, and they do a great job bringing in players that are both retired and playing and getting everybody involved and familiar and getting to kind of know the Dodger way. It kind of creates loyalty within the organization, which I think is great.
People, when they think of baseball for the major leagues, they think of the travel, the private jets, all that stuff to get to places. In the minor leagues, that is not true. How hard was it to travel on the buses and on those long road trips for you?
I mean, it's a grind. And my dad laughed when he saw my contract. I don't think they increased the pay since he played. You're not making very much money and you're on the road a lot of the time. And it's exhausting and it's certainly not as flashy as what might be perceived, but it's also a lot of fun. I mean, you're with a bunch of people that are your age going through the same thing. You end up finding ways to stay entertained and you kind of laugh at the whole thing. I have fond memories, but I don't miss the 12-hour bus ride.
What's a favorite fond memory for you of one of those bus rides or one of those trips?
Oh, man. There's plenty of stories. Everyone's got a story of the bus breaking down. I don't think you've really had a minor league season complete until the bus is broken down in the middle of the night. So we had a couple times where that happened. We broke down in Yosemite in the Pioneer League. It was 3 a.m. in Yosemite in the middle of nowhere, part terrifying and part beautiful. And we had guys taking turns to see how far in the forest they would run before they got scared. That was kind of comical at the time, but now looking back, you don't get many chances to see Yosemite in the middle of the night, which is pretty cool.
You talked a little bit about the camaraderie that this builds. Who are some of the players from those days that you're still close with?
We still have a group text from my very first season in Ogden between Kyle Russell, who's on my Team USA team and played at Texas. So we played a ton against each other. And between him and then Nick Buss, I think he made the big leagues. He was with USC, and Brian Ruggiano. We kind of became buddies and have a group thread that's been going on for 10, 12 years now, which is fun. Evaldi is kind of part of that group. He joined our team later, so he's a really, really good guy that's been fun to connect with whenever he's in town. And we got a couple of the White Sox guys. I don't think anybody's playing anymore. It's fun to keep in touch. Every once in a while, work brings us all a little closer and we get a chance to grab a beer too, which is fun.
In 2010, you got a chance to play with your cousin Dustin. That has to be pretty cool, I would think, just to have the opportunity to play with a family member and just be able to spend time together because you spend so many years apart, each of you chasing your own dream.
At the time, it was probably more fun for me because I got moved up and he came down from AA, but it was really fun. We actually ended up living together. We didn't have permanent living situations. So one of my old roommates from Stanford was Toby Gerhart, and his family was not too far from the stadium and was kind enough to let us stay at their house. I don't think we'd ever gotten a chance to play with each other in our entire lives before that. So it was a lot of fun. It's definitely a highlight for me. And we never got to play together in high school. We were kind of 1 year off. So it was cool to get that experience and live together, which was hilarious. And we had a good time.
I bet there's got to be a fun story of you guys living together.
Toby's family was just so kind to us. At the time, they had a bunch of kids still living there. So to let us cram in with them was incredibly thoughtful and made it feel like home. And I think I slept on a little cot in front of Dustin. So it was close quarters.
For listeners who don't know, Toby Gerhart ended up actually playing in the NFL with the Vikings for a couple of years. What's a good story about Toby that maybe people don't know?
Well, I mean, if anybody doesn't realize it, he was an incredibly talented baseball player. He would play football and then not pick up a baseball bat basically until 3 weeks before the baseball season and somehow figure it out. And he is one of the kindest and smartest people I've ever played baseball with. He's just an incredible person. He's now out in Nashville and graduated from Stanford Business School. And talk about just kind of the multifaceted, well-rounded human. He is the perfect example.
After a couple years in the Dodgers system, you ended up going to the White Sox. What kind of led to that?
I got released from the Dodgers, and the next day got a call from the White Sox to see if I wanted to come to spring training and get a chance to go play in their high A team. So I jumped on it. I had just finished my degree at Stanford in the off season, so I had my degree at that point and felt like I wanted to give it one more year and really get a chance and see what I could do. And the White Sox gave me a chance to play every day. I'm so glad I did it. They were just such a great organization, a really great team. I had a lot of fun, and I had not really played a ton the year before. So to go out and really get a chance to play every day, I hadn't had that in a bit. And as I had my degree, I felt like I was kind of just really getting a shot to let everything go. And probably one of the most fun seasons I had since my first season playing. And it was just a great group. And Carolina League was a great league, great fans. People showed up. It was a lot of fun. And I'm very thankful I got that chance to play a season with them.
Is there a moment from that season that stands out in your memory?
We got to play the big league club in an exhibition game, which was really fun. Paul Canerico was still there, and Paul went to Chaparral, so had the same high school coach I did. It was fun to kind of make that connection. The season ended, I kind of knew I was probably done. And my brother was playing at Virginia Commonwealth. I got to go watch him play, and which was special. I didn't really get a chance to ever watch him play because I was at Stanford. He got to come to my games, but I rarely ever got to see him play. So it was kind of all around just a great memories with some perspective. I appreciate that I had that opportunity to kind of do all those things.
You make the decision to hang up your baseball spikes. Where has life taken you since?
I immediately drove across the country, stopped in Chicago to tell them I was done. And Buddy Bell was the head of minor leagues at the time. He offered me a chance to come and work for the White Sox, but I needed some distance from baseball, I felt like, and wanted to go do something different first. My girlfriend and now wife was in San Francisco. The only thing I knew was I was heading over that way via Vegas. I think my teammate Joey August was having his bachelor party in Vegas. So I stopped there for that and then just went to San Francisco and started job searching, really having no idea what I wanted to do, and just that it was going to probably be in the Bay Area. I wanted to be near my now wife. Just kind of did the networking thing and ended up doing investment banking was where I landed, and doing finance, and got lucky, joined a great group. And from there, I've been in this tech software finance world since then.
With the tech software world, as opposed to just staying with investment banking, what appealed to you, I guess, about kind of merging the two areas?
Investment banking, when I started, I really didn't even know what it was. We focused on tech and software mergers and acquisitions, and it was really a great way to learn finance. It's a big grind in what I was doing. You work 18-hour days. And for me, it was minor league baseball kind of prepared me for that, right? Being on a bus, I can stay in one place for 18 hours. You tell me I don't have to ride a bus, this is no problem. So it kind of had prepared me for that. And then kind of funny how the whole world comes together. The guy I had mentioned, Andy Suter, who was my roommate twice over, his dad and his brother and him started a company with a guy named Ron Johnson who started Apple retail stores. And they were doing this kind of last mile delivery company and were looking for a business hire, and kind of right place, right time. And I hopped over there, and that was what really exposed me to early stage companies. It was the closest thing I've had to having a team again and really feeling like we were building something. And that's what made me fall in love with early stage companies. I was there for 4 years, and I invest in early stage companies. We're a now 6-person team, and we primarily focus on investing in early stage companies in construction technology. So there's a little bit of that blue collar mindset that I kind of grew up with. We have that small team mentality, and it kind of is all fit together now and makes sense. I'm having a blast and trying to recreate that camaraderie, to be honest. It's hard to get and hard to make, but when you have it, it makes things so much fun.
Is there any thought about one day maybe getting back into the baseball coaching front office side of things?
I don't think so. It's fun to be a fan and get to just watch. I think all the guys I played with are now officially retired for the most part, and it was fun to kind of watch those guys. So never say never. I don't think I'd ever go into the coaching side. I enjoy the business side a lot and the challenges of doing that. So I'm always paying attention, and it's fun to watch, and have a couple guys I know that are now working in the front office, and it's fun to hear how the game's evolved and how things are looked at these days. It's fascinating to see how fast it's changed.
When you initially transitioned from being a player into the business world, how much did your dad help you with that? Because he kind of had to do the same thing.
My dad having to make that transition, it's a tough transition for a lot of people. A lot of players, it's their identity if that's all you've done your entire life. And I was one of them. Baseball is all consuming, and you don't really do much outside of it. You can't do summer internships and all that. So it can be really challenging. And it was certainly helpful to have an example in my dad, who has a very successful career outside of baseball, and having my parents be so supportive, and my dad constantly reminding me that this is not your life and there's a lot ahead. And now being a dad myself, try to model that as a parent now and be supportive of whatever my kids get into, whether it be sports or academics or whatever they find interesting.
Because not every college baseball player and minor league player will end up making the major leagues, what advice do you have for them in terms of getting prepared to make a transition to wherever they end up going that is their next step?
Some advice that I got that I think was really valuable was, one, finding an industry that is rising tide. That was some advice that a former Stanford baseball player gave me when I was first starting out. And his point was, you can fail a bunch, and still land on your feet as long as you're in an industry that's rising and growing and you can make some mistakes. And I think there's a lot to that from a career standpoint, and not being afraid to reach out to college alumni or professional alumni or people you know and played with and were your teammates. I've found that everybody wants to be supportive and helpful, and I try to return the favor and be helpful for anybody that is going through that themselves. I think you'd be surprised at the generosity if you give it a chance.
Transitioning back to family for just a moment, because I'm curious. With your dad, your uncle Robin, and your other uncle Jim, who played football, which a lot of people don't know as well, were your grandparents athletes as well, or did they do something else?
I always find it interesting that not many people know what my dad and uncle's parents did. People find it surprising that their parents were both scientists and were not athletes. So my grandpa worked on the Manhattan Project and was at Rocketdyne that built the rockets for Apollo. And that's what brought them out to LA originally, was to work on the testing the rocket engines. And my grandmother was also an engineer, which is pretty cool.
Did your grandfather ever talk about working on the Manhattan Project?
No, he would not talk about it much. He passed away when I was a freshman at Stanford. And I wish I would have asked him more questions, but I don't know that he really would have talked about it. And I don't know that anybody really knew to what extent he was involved or not. Since he passed away, we've found various items that suggest he was pretty involved in the project. I can imagine how difficult and probably a lot of feelings I'm sure he had about the whole thing. So it was pretty interesting to see some of the stuff he worked on, and then eventually went into the space program, which was, for me, being a space nerd and having wanted to be an astronaut for a long time, that was a really cool thing to be able to talk to him about.
Being a space nerd and wanting to be an astronaut, have you ever been to NASA?
Oh, yeah. We got to do trips out to Cape Canaveral and do the whole NASA tour. My family was kind enough to put up with what I'm sure was maybe slightly boring to them, but super exciting to me. I haven't seen a rocket launch yet, sadly, but at some point I'll be able to check that off the bucket list.
How did your love of space grow?
Since I was a little kid, was super interested in space. I went to space camp with my grandpa out here down in San Jose, not too far from Stanford. So it's always been something that fascinated me, and maybe it came from my grandpa as a kid. I couldn't tell you from a particular moment, but it's always been something I've been interested in. And at one period of time, I wanted to be a baseball player and an astronaut in the off season, if that made any sense. But I get to scratch the itch a little bit in my job now because we do see some technology that comes out of the space program and gets applied to things on Earth, which is fun.
The opportunity to go out to space ever came about to do space exploration, would you do it?
Good question. I think my wife would tell me absolutely not. I think certainly have to think about it a little harder with a couple kids and a third on the way now. But if the opportunity presented itself, it would be tough to say no, assuming it was all safe.
Austin, I want to thank you very much for joining the I Play 2 podcast today and taking the time to share all those baseball memories with us. Greatly appreciate it, and best of luck in your current career. We'll catch up soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob. It was a lot of fun to be part of the show, and hopefully we'll run across each other in Dallas soon.